Antman is an exciting superhero film set in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, MCU. The movie introduces us to Scott Lang, a reformed thief who becomes the new Ant-Man. With a mix of action, humor, and heart, this film takes audiences on an exhilarating journey as Scott embraces his newfound abilities to save the world and forge a bond with his daughter, all while facing off against the villainous Yellow Jacket. In 1989, Hank Pym quits working for S.H.I.E.L.D. when he finds out that Howard Stark is trying to copy his shrinking technology. He is determined to keep this technology a secret. In today's time, Scott Lang has finished his prison sentence at San Quentin State Prison. His former cellmate, Luis, is there to pick him up and offers him a place to stay at his apartment. Scott, with his criminal record, struggles to find a legal job. He had discovered that his former company was ripping off its customers, so he hacked into their system and returned millions of dollars to the customers. Luis introduces him to Dave, who's skilled at driving getaway cars, and Kurt, who specializes in identity theft. Luis has information about a potential robbery they could undertake as a team, but Scott is not interested. Hank is invited to a presentation at the company he started, Pymtech. During the event, he crosses paths with his daughter, Hope Van Dyne, who calls him by his first name and is seemingly not on good terms with his daughter and his former apprentice, Darren Cross. Darren unveils a prototype of the Yellow Jacket suit inspired by the Ant-Man suit Hank used. Following the presentation, Hope discloses that Darren hasn't been able to effectively shrink living organisms with the technology, and their pretended conflict is a strategy to earn Darren's trust. Scott borrows Luis' van and surprises his daughter, Cassie, at her birthday party. At the party, he encounters Officer Jim Paxton, who is about to become Cassie's stepfather and is not pleased to see Scott. Maggie, Scott's ex-wife, informs him that he needs to find a lawful job and catch up on his overdue child support payments if he wants to spend more time with Cassie. Despite wanting to see Cassie, Jim and Maggie urge Scott to leave the party. At Pymtech, Hope and Darren attempt to shrink a sheep to a small size, but their experiment goes wrong, resulting in the death of the sheep. Despite this failure, Darren insists on trying the experiment again with another sheep. Scott understands that it will take over a year to see Cassie again if he works a low-paying job, so he decides to accept Luis' offer. Emily, a housekeeper who dated Ernesto's friend Carlos, shares information about a house with a large safe that likely contains valuable items. Scott agrees to assist them in the robbery plan. Luis gathers supplies for the break-in, and Kurt acquires a communication technician's uniform. Later that night, Kurt climbs a pole outside Hank's house and disrupts the electrical circuit, cutting off all phone communication. Scott then enters the scene by climbing over the fence, disabling window sensors, and entering the basement. Inside, he finds another door protected by a fingerprint lock. Scott cleverly uses tape to lift Hank's fingerprint and open the door. Upon reaching the safe, Scott faces the challenge of breaking its steel door. He drills small holes around the lock, injects water, and uses nitrogen to freeze it. This freezing process distorts the steel and causes the bolts to release. Inside the safe, he discovers an unusual-looking bodysuit and helmet, which he takes. Meanwhile, Hank has been observing these events from upstairs. Disheartened by their unsuccessful heist, the group returns to Luis' apartment. Scott enters the bathroom and takes a closer look at the stolen suit. Puzzled by its high security, he notices tubes filled with red and blue liquid. Out of curiosity, he puts on the suit and stands in the bathtub to examine himself in the mirror. While in the bathroom, he notices a red button on the suit's glove and presses it, causing himself to shrink instantly to a mere half-inch in height. At that moment, Luis enters the bathroom and turns on the water in the bathtub, creating a miniature tidal wave from tiny Scott's perspective. Scott hears a voice through an earpiece in the suit's helmet. Panicked, he leaps away from the water and finds himself falling through a crack, landing in the apartment below. In that room, a lively party is in full swing, and Scott suddenly realizes he's on a record player, with the needle slowly approaching him. In a quick move, he manages to escape, landing on the floor where people are dancing. He makes his way under a door and into the hallway, only to be swiftly sucked up by a vacuum cleaner. When the vacuum's dust bag is eventually emptied, he takes another leap, this time landing on a rat. After a hasty getaway from the rodent, he lands on a mouse trap, triggering it and sending him catapulting through a window and lands on a car. He then returns to his normal size. Scott rushes back home and promptly removes the suit. Recognizing that he's been under surveillance, he makes the decision to return the suit to Hank's secure vault. However, upon leaving the premises, he finds himself surrounded by law enforcement officers and is subsequently taken into custody. Inside the prison, Officer Paxton is present, and Gale informs him that Scott's attorney has arrived. Scott, bewildered by the unexpected legal counsel, meets with a lawyer he never sought or anticipated. The person posing as Scott's lawyer turns out to be Hank himself. Hank presents Scott with a rather unusual proposition. He can either spend his life behind bars or follow Hank's directives. Completely taken aback, Scott is at a loss for words, prompting Hank to reveal that he intentionally allowed Scott to steal the suit. Scott is then returned to his prison cell, where a multitude of ants help him recover the suit. Upon putting it on and shrinking down, he makes a swift escape from the prison. One of Hank's ants with wings comes to his aid, and Scott hops on, soaring above the city. Scott blacked out while in midair, and when he wakes up, he found himself in Hank's mansion. Hank explains to Scott that he originally created the suit but became concerned about its potential misuse, leading him to hide it away. Unfortunately, Darren learned about the shrinking tech, and when Hank refused to share it, Darren pushed him out of Pymtech. Recognizing Darren's danger, Hope joined forces with her father to thwart him. Hank then reveals to Scott that he requires his assistance to become Antman and prevent individuals like Darren from causing harm. This revelation dawns on Scott, offering him the opportunity to become a genuine hero, someone worthy of being the father his daughter deserves. Scott undergoes martial arts training and learns how to command ant colonies. He practices his ability to shrink and grow at precise moments. Hope doubts Scott's capabilities and insists on wearing the suit herself to infiltrate the lab, steal the Yellow Jacket suit, and destroy their data to stop Darren from accomplishing his plans. She becomes frustrated when Hank refuses her request. However, Scott reminds her that he was chosen to be the new Antman by Hank because of his love for her and his inability to bear losing her. Hank reveals the tragic truth about how Hope's mother died. There was an ICBM, intercontinental ballistic missile, launched at the US, and Hank tried to stop it. However, even when reduced to ant size, he couldn't access it. Hope's mother had a similar suit, known as the Wasp. She made the brave decision to shrink to subatomic size and successfully stopped the missile. Unfortunately, she couldn't return from that minuscule state and became lost in the quantum realm. After their reconciliation, Scott is finally capable of using the suit. Hank informs him that a crucial piece of technology necessary for stealing the suit from Darren is located in an abandoned SHIELD building, which happens to be the current Avengers headquarters. Scott flies to the building, but triggers a sensor on the roof, alerting Sam Wilson, also known as Falcon. Sam can see Scott even when he's tiny, leading to a skirmish. During the battle, Scott infiltrates Falcon's jetpack, causing it to malfunction. He successfully retrieves the required equipment and escapes. Darren Cross achieves success in shrinking a lamb, and he envisions taking control of Pymtech. He invites Hank to a significant public reveal, and then he informs Hope about the heightened security measures, including the use of microscopic mesh to cover all the vents. This complicates their plan, so they decide to enlist more help. Luis, Kurt, and Dave join the team. Luis pretends to be a security guard and lowers the water pressure to allow Scott to access the building through the plumbing system. Scott strategically places explosives throughout the building. However, as he attempts to steal the suit, he finds himself trapped in a glass cage by a prepared Darren, who had foreseen the break-in. Darren intends to sell the technology to Hydra. Scott manages to break free and defeats the Hydra agents. Hank and Hope escape by converting a small tank to its full size and using it to exit through the building's side. Darren flees in a helicopter from the rooftop just before the building explodes. Darren dons the Yellow Jacket suit, and he and Scott engage in a battle inside a helicopter. Eventually, they both fall out of the aircraft. Scott manages to imprison Darren inside a bug zapper. However, just as Scott is about to destroy the suit, Jim Paxton arrives to arrest him. In a desperate move, Darren goes to Jim and Cassie's house, endangering their lives, to lure Scott into a confrontation. While being taken away, Scott tries to convince Jim to let him go as he needs to destroy Darren's suit. Jim thinks he is delusional, and while on their way to the police station, they receive a report happening at Jim's house. Scott wears the helmet and escapes to save his daughter. Scott arrives, and a fight ensues. Scott realizes that the only way to defeat Darren is to shrink to a subatomic size, causing Darren to shrink into nothingness. Scott finds himself trapped in the quantum realm, but he hears Cassie's voice. Using his knowledge, he rewires the suit, undoing the shrinking process and returning to his regular size. After the intense battle, Paxton appreciates appreciates Scott's heroics and helps him avoid going back to prison. Hank ponders whether Hope's mother might still be alive in some way. Luis informs Scott that Falcon is searching for him. In a mid-credits scene, Pym reveals an improved prototype of the Wasp suit to Hope, offering it to her. She responds by saying, "Finally, it's about time." In a post-credits scene, Captain America and Falcon have captured the Winter Soldier and are discussing their next steps. They can't inform Iron Man because of the Accords, so Wilson suggests that he knows someone they can reach out to for assistance. And the movie ends here. Thank you for watching, and I highly recommend watching the entire movie as it is incredibly enjoyable. If you haven't already, please consider subscribing to our channel so you can stay updated and receive notifications whenever we upload new videos.